Hi, this is Bo from Aircraft in Pixels. Before we dive into the progress on the 1970 tool Airfix Spitfire Mk I kit, I want to share some updates to some of the previous videos in this series. On the references video, several viewers had good things to say about the Wing Leader Mark I book. So much so that I ordered a copy. It took its sweet time getting across the pond, but it's here now, and I have to say I'm pretty pleased with it. Like the title says, or the subtitle rather, it is primarily a photo archive. It's really just a series of contemporary photos, quite good ones though, and the text is sparse but very authoritative and with lots of good information. Actually, the website for this book pretty much will sell you if you're ever going to be sold on this book, because they are pretty generous with the number of images they show from the book. Large images really, and you really get a good idea of what's in it. So you won't be too surprised when it arrives at your door. I really do recommend this. Yeah, there are some really lovely color profiles as well, and it's in chronological order. So they start at the very sort of beginning and go through the Dunkirk period and then the Battle of Britain period. And rather gratifying to me, at the very end, back of the book, there are sort of a checklist of things that you won't find on a pre-1941 Mark I. And these are all things that I figured out on my own. That's why I feel sort of gratified. But it's kind of nice to have them all in one place. This information is sort of kind of spread out all over the place. And, some of those other references that I showed you don't really seem to understand that, for instance, there is no crowbar in the door on a Mark I in 1940, and they were not painted red, as they point out here, and the shape of the oil cooler and these reinforcing strakes over the wing, etc. So anyway, this is a great book, and thanks to the viewers who prompted me to put down for it. So that's that. The other thing I wanted to mention as far as references go is a website that's called spitfireparts.com. It's not the prettiest, well-organized, or easy to navigate website, but it's a treasure trove of photos of World War I aircraft, well, quite literally junk. As the name implies, Spitfire parts are a lot of that junk. Definitely interesting, definitely worth perusing. You'll learn all sorts of stuff about instruments and equipment and spade grips and rudder pedals and things like that. So that's been a big source of for my research on the Spitfire Mark I. I also have a few aftermarket bits that have arrived from around the world. Let's see. So, from the Czech Republic, we have the familiar HGW product. This is the Sutton harness. They actually make this with two different part numbers and two different sort of descriptions. They're both identical, and I haven't even opened this yet. I had to order this from Hanantz, so this came from across the pond as well. I don't know why they don't stock this here in the United States, but as you can see, the belts themselves are made out of this sort of micro fabric stuff that's been laser cut, and they're just they have like nicely cut holes in them and stuff. And then there's also a little bits of photo etch for the buckles and fastening stuff. So I've used these HGW belts on a lot of my World War I projects, and I've always been pretty pleased with them. So kind of looking forward to that. Incidentally, Brian Atkinson, his Spitfire Explored videos, one of them has a pretty in-depth coverage on how the release mechanism on the Sutton harness worked in the Spitfire, and it's pretty interesting. It's pretty elaborate, as this drawing that I'm going to throw up here kind of hints at. So that's worth checking out if you're at all interested in sort of the nitty-gritty details of how these things work. Okay, so I also have some masks. These are from Montex. I've never used Montex masks before. I've heard good things about them. I usually cut my own masks. I have a silver bullet cutter, and I kind of know how to use Illustrator and stuff to make these things, so it's kind of right up my alley. I've been a graphic designer my whole life. So, but anyway, this is kind of, I just kind of thought I would try these out. Montex has 3 or 4 mask sets for the Airfix Spitfire Mark I, or for the Spitfire Mark I shouldn't say Airfix necessarily. So there's 2 schemes here. They're both early schemes. There's the familiar bogus LOB, and then I kind of like this 92 Squadron scheme. It's sort of a sister to 7349 or whatever it is. I can't remember the digits in the right order, but anyway, so anyway, here's what this stuff looks like. I don't know how much this will show up, but it's printed on, it's vinyl masks cut out. So there's also a little bit of a decal for that bogus marking, and these might be fun to use. So we'll see. We'll check them out. I have not completely committed to that scheme yet. This particular 92 Squadron scheme, but I do like the the night white and aluminum undersurfaces. I also like the gas patch detail. I don't really know if they even know that was there, but anyway, I'm leaning towards doing this. This May 1940 92 Squadron scheme. So anyway, that's these Montex masks. These are from Poland. We also have some more masks. These are top notch. I'm pretty sure these are American. No, sorry, these are from the UK. What's wrong with me? These also came from Hanantz. These are the this is the A scheme for the Spitfire. When I was a kid and a young enthusiast, airplane enthusiast, I kind of always assumed that the RAF camouflage schemes were just sort of random blotches of brown and green that were just, kind of, different from one to the next. It wasn't until I think I got Camouflage and Markings book, which I showed in one of the previous videos, that I really understood that this scheme was very particular. The contours were defined, and it was actually the same contours basically for all the different RAF aircraft scaled up. There were 2 schemes. There was the A and the B scheme. The B scheme was merely the mirror image of the A scheme. And the original idea was that the A machines would be, the even numbered serial number machines would get the A scheme, and the odd numbered machines would get the B scheme. But apparently that fell by the wayside rather quickly, and there's tons of examples in the book I just showed you, the Wing Leader book, of Spitfires that don't conform to that. And from what I understand, they pretty much abandoned the B scheme idea wholesale not long after. So anyway, let's open this up. I also have not really opened this up. I just looked at the outside of it. I'm guessing this is more sort of nice big vinyl. Oops. Sorry about that. Some big gray vinyl sheets of stuff. I guess this is just a spare sheet, but Again, I usually cut my own masks, but this will save some drudgery, and what the heck, I thought I'd try it. So we'll see how that goes. All right, from Norway, from Buchan Models, otherwise known as Attitude Aviation, I've got a couple of things. First of all, there's these 5-spoke cast resin wheels for the Spitfire. Several people recommended these as being the best. I know Barracuda makes stuff too, and I kind of know, well, I know of Roy pretty well, but anyway, I decided to go for these, and they are quite lovely. I'll do a close-up photo offline and stick this here, but yeah, they're really very nice. Yeah, really nice detail and beautifully cast. And so yeah, there's some cast wheels to solve that problem with the kit. And then also he makes a complete cockpit interior set. This is mixed media. It's resin and photo etch. And I didn't count the parts, but there's quite a few. So it's it basically corrects one of the real problems with the kit, that the bottom half of the cockpit tub isn't really the right shape at all. It sort of balloons out into the fillets of the wing, which is just not how it went. So he's got, you know, sort of two new inner lower halves of the fuselage. Nothing to say about what to do with the upper half, which is also really bad on the kit. But I've got a whole solution to that. In fact, I'm probably not going to use very much of this, but it's really not because it's not wonderful. It's just it doesn't quite fit in with what I'm doing. So here's the firewall, cockpit firewall. And then there's some nice little bits. I've since corresponded with Torres, I think is his name. Forgive me if I've got that wrong. I will correct it in the subtitles. But he's got some, you know, some extra little bits, some detail bits, including the late style voltage regulator that goes behind the pilot's headrest. And there's a reason for this that I've sort of since discovered, and that is that he actually, when he's not creating resin models of Spitfires or teaching aeronautics, he actually flies it's either a Mark 9 or Mark 16, I can't remember which, or it wasn't clear to me, but it's not a Mark 1, and so his whole passion is you know, the slightly later model ones, and you know, that's all good. So anyway, there's wonderful little details which I will show close-ups of, and then also of course there's the other formers, and then there's some sort of diabolical photo etch. There's the headrest armor. That's one of the, let's see if I can get this out. Oops. Well, look at this. Again, I'll do a close-up photo of it, but I mean, this is just sadistic. He's got the individual rivets that are the details that go on these sort of reinforcing plates that you're supposed to glue them individually to these reinforcing plates, which I appreciate. I'm guessing most modelers would never do that. I'm actually the kind of person that would. I kind of appreciate that sickness. But anyway, and then he's got the other formers, including, this is frame number 11. This is just, there's a little bit of flash and stuff on here, but it's just beautifully done. And again, I'll post some close-ups of this so you can have a look. But yeah, definitely a major upgrade to the pretty sad stuff that is in the kit. This is former number 8. After this flash is cleaned up, it should look really nice. And this is right in front of, or right behind it's right behind the instrument panel. So your pilot's legs go through here to the rudder pedals and stuff. So anyway, so that's some updates to the references and the aftermarket bits videos, and that's pretty much, from what I can glean, about the sum total of what's available right now for this old kit. So we're going to talk next about where the build is. So on to that. When people talk about the shortcomings of this kit, one of the first things that comes up is the lack of dihedral in the wings. Dihedral, of course, refers to the upward inclination of the wing in relation to the lateral axis. On the Spitfire, this angle is 6 degrees, which is clear on this wing plan drawing once the frontal elevation is rotated so the aircraft center line is perpendicular to the ground. The lower surface of the wings are molded in a single very large piece, which is rather floppy and essentially flat. Meanwhile, the upper half of each wing is designed to be glued directly to the heavy flanges on the lower fuselage, marked in red here in my 3D mock-up. This would actually provide the proper dihedral were it possible to actually assemble it tightly enough, but in practice this is pretty difficult to achieve with a butt glue joint, given the lack of interlocking slots or any other mechanical means, not to mention the generally poor fit. The other thing I don't love about the way the Airfix kit is engineered is it really doesn't correspond to how the actual plane went together, especially in terms of how the wings attach to the fuselage. The wings are actually in two pieces, well, two main planes, and they were bolted to the sides of the fuselage, and the fillet is an aerodynamic, I wouldn't say afterthought, but it doesn't serve any structural purpose. My plan is to have my model go together like the original. That's going to mean cutting it up and creating an all-new fuselage tub, among other things. So let the butchery begin. It's kind of serendipitous that this old kit is molded in this otherwise horrid white plastic, as it does aid with marking up the inside to match features on the outside. I want to thin the inside of the fuselage precisely where the panel lines I'm going to cut along lie. Delineating the panel lines with blue tape and then shining a bright light through the part allows me to see with a good degree of precision where those panel lines are. With the inside of the fuselage marked up, it's time to go old school Shep Payne style with the Dremel. I start by knocking down the ribs and other protuberances and then methodically thin along the line until the wall thickness is about 3 millimeters. It's pretty rough looking now, but I'll clean it up once it's all cut apart. For these long, straight cuts along the panel lines, a razor saw is really the way to go. It's really just a slow, methodical process, just trying to stay on the panel line on the outside. Sometimes having to go back around and thin if the thinning area is not quite in the right place, and just taking your time until it comes apart, and it usually comes out pretty clean. So a little pro tip, lubricating the saw blade with turpentine, which is what I have in that Grey Poupon jar, just keeps the saw from binding and therefore bending, and it keeps the swarf out of the cut line, and yeah, just makes it easier going. For the radio hatch and the battery door, a slightly different technique is used. Saw isn't going to really work in this with these sharp corners, so instead just a good old-fashioned X-Acto knife, cutting along the inside, again following the panel lines, thinning it as much as possible down to 0.3 millimeters, and then just carefully cutting along the inside of the panel lines until it's all good. Once the fuselage is all cut up, I need a way of putting it together and taking it apart, basically to establish a basis of truth, and yeah, to allow me to take it apart and fit parts to the inside and put it back together again. So I'm going to hold it together with temporary screws. I don't have shots of doing that with the fuselage, but I do with the tail unit. So I'll show you that basic procedure now. So the basic issue is being able to drill perpendicular to the center line of the fuselage, or in this case the tail unit. And you want to drill through both parts, and you want to have everything in alignment. Ideally it's at least one series of drilling operations. So that means coming up with some kind of jig to hold the workpiece so that it is in fact perpendicular and with respect to the center line to the bed of the drill. So Lego is my go-to tool for this. Lego and Instamold, that is. Instamold, if you don't know what it is yeah, it's a thermo-activated molding plasticky snot-like thing, stuff. You put it in nearly boiling water for a couple of minutes and it softens up, and then you can conform it to whatever you want. It actually conforms to Lego and model parts very well, and doing this you can make a nice armature to hold the workpiece in the drill press. To mount the workpiece on the XY table on the drill press, I have kind of a standard arrangement of Lego Technic blocks that works really well. Basically, the nice thing about Legos is their uniform size, and they're square, meaning, you know, true square. I mean, they're really remarkably good in that respect. And yeah, so this works pretty well, this little table thing that I can then stick the workpiece on its little plate on top of this construction. So now we're almost ready to drill. I like to use a busted 0.1 millimeter carbide drill bit to line up the hole for drilling before I actually chuck up a real bit. That way you can get reeled down with it and you can actually push sort of hard without busting it. Yeah, don't throw away those busted carbide bits. They're useful for all sorts of things. So once I have the pilot hole drilled on the top half, or the one side of the tailpiece, I'm going to chuck up a 2.5 millimeter bit and then a 2.5 milli bit and drill basically a hole to accept a 2.5 millimeter styrene rod lug that the screw will screw into once this thing is all done. So here I'm gluing in the little styrene 2.5 millimeter rod lug, and once this is set up, I'll put it back in the drill press and bore the hole for the threads to bite into. And this is the beauty of using Lego for the table on the XY table, is that it's going to stay in perfect registration. Because the Legos are just, they're just pretty good as far as precision goes. And so all I have to do is just put it back in the same place as it was before, and my drill press is going to be all lined up to do the next drilling operation after a half hour or so when this is dry. So here's where we are with the assembled empennage for the Spitfire. So I've drilled out four holes and added lugs to the inside of it, and it's screwed together with 1 millimeter diameter eyeglass screws that are 3 millimeters, actually 3.5 millimeters long. Their head size is about 2 millimeters, something like that. And so I will plug these holes when I'm done taking this thing apart and putting it back together, which I should be able to take it apart now, barring some sadness. So here's what it looks like on the inside. These are the 4 lugs that I've added. These are I think this is the same stuff. 2.5 millimeter styrene rod. It's really fun working with styrene and thin glue. I enjoy it a lot. It's just kind of fun welding stuff together with it. So the inside of this is rough, but that's going to be something that I will take care of as the model goes, because I do want to add the interior details. I have made one interior former. Hang on, I'll go get it. So this is 3D printed former for the end of the tail unit, which will mate with the similar shaped one in the fuselage proper. But the nice thing is, though, this will come apart and go back together. Maybe not an infinite number of times, but a great number of times. And I have, like I said, established a baseline truth as to how these things fit together, because the panel lines, I mean, it lines up here, but this panel line doesn't line up. The kit's it just wasn't CAD engineered, and it was done in a different time and day when standards were a little bit different than they are now. All right. So just a quick note about thinning the fuselage sides. I have a very square and very flat machinist vise, which I've secured to my XY table on my drill press, and then secured the plastic parts to that machinist vise with double-sided masking tape, a great product which I use all the time. It's plenty strong for this process, and so I've just been milling the sides down to as thin as I can, about 0.4 millimeters, and then just advancing the fuselage side and turning it ever, a few degrees, and then doing another row or so. So in that way, I was able to pretty much do about 3/4 of the area that I needed to thin, just leaving the rest, especially the part right in front of the windshield, or below the windshield I should say, and then behind the last portion of the cockpit canopy to be done by hand with the Dremel. So that worked pretty well, and yeah, I'm pretty pleased with how that came out. And so now, just to bring you up to date on where the build is as of right now today. I've got the fuselage all cut up and thinned pretty much. Well, it's not as neat as I will have it eventually, but it is basically thinned to its final thinness. I've iterated through many versions of 3D printed tub. None of these are anywhere near final, but each one of them gets the fitting a little bit closer to the final. Likewise, I've made many versions of this number 12 former, which is the former that is sort of behind the seat, behind the former that's behind the seat, and kind of is the last former in the very thinnest part of the what's going to be the very thinnest part of the fuselage walls. So yeah, so here are many iterations, I don't know, 6 versions of this former that I've made so far. Each one just a little bit closer to fitting right. The one that I have now, I'm pretty pleased with how it fits. It's all still a little bit wambly, but it's not bad. Not bad. Yeah, I need to... Hello, camera. Can you see it? These, of course, are just dummy. These are just dummies for the fuselage shape based on the Montfort book and the kit dimensions, just trying to get those things to resolve. The inner contours of the fuselage don't really quite match what's supposed to be there based on the books, but it looks close enough to me. And yeah, so the idea is just to I keep iterating through these printed formers and eventually getting something that's that fits perfectly. I will create new inner sides. I've experimented with printing walls that are really, really thin, and so I'll have the longerons and the stringers and stuff on those, and they should conform pretty nicely to this thinned out fuselage wall. And like the tail, I've pretty much got this ready to go for the former and back, like so. Yeah, and so much like the tail goes together, this is temporary right here. It's the rear of the fuselage is held together with 4 screws. Again, this is to establish kind of a baseline, because like the tail units, like one set of panel lines will line up and the other ones won't, and so you just kind of have to decide, which ones you're going to go with, and and make the rest of them work with it. So yeah, so we can take this apart and have a look at the inside walls real quick. I just have this held together with a couple screws right now. Come on. Yeah, so this is what, this is not at its final form, but it's pretty close. It's pretty thin. Last time I measured it, it was in most places about 0.4 millimeters thick everywhere. And same with this side. This side still looks a little bit like something the cat chewed up, but working on it. So anyway, that's where this build is as of this moment. Thanks for watching, and if you like this kind of stuff, check out my Patreon page. I am offering 3D printed parts to my Patreons, Spitfire parts and other stuff too, and please hit subscribe anyway, so I can eventually become a YouTube god. No, it's not going to happen. But anyway, thanks for watching. So long.